Fail2Ban is a program that runs on Linux servers to protect, various services like SSH, anything that requires some sort of outside networking. Essentially, Fail2Ban will monitor that program-specific logs or that port, and will then fail any failed authentication attempts that happen so many times in a row. This is highly configurable. Out of the box, it will ban or protect SSH after, I believe it's 5 attempts. What we're going to be doing today is implementing a way to visually see where each one of these banned IPs is coming from, using sort of a geolocator alongside the banned IPs. If we take a look at this right here, this is an example of the protocols that we have set up. On my server right now, we only have SSH. These other two are just test protocols used for or during creation. We have last 5 block countries, and then we have a top 5 and so on country list. This is an interactive Google Maps using their API. There is a great article over on this website here, which will be linked, going over how to set this up. However, this author, there's a few elements here that are no longer relevant or now 404, so we're just kind of going to go over how to set this up today in 2019. The first thing you're going to need to do is install Fail2Ban. This article here from DigitalOcean is a fantastic one to getting this set up with your basics, and then this is highly configurable later on down the line if you need to protect particular services. It will step you through each command that you're going to need to run, and then also show you what the defaults are for each type of config. They also do a great job of defining each one of these configuration parameters, as well as later on down the line specify the filters, which we're going to utilize, as well as the action file, which the action file right here is going to be the biggest part of this entire sort of setup. As you can see, the first step here is the download banhammer. It says that you can just use a directory of your choosing. For this instance, I chose the temp directory. Once you've done that, you're just going to copy the entire www folder into the web root. For someone like myself, I have multiple domains set up on this host. So I picked a domain that I wanted to use for this and then put it into that public HTML folder because I am using a CMS. It won't matter where it is down the directory as long as it is accessible by a web user. I'm going to show you that here in a second. Alright, so as you can see here, I am the public HTML folder. I've enabled it jerks. We have the CSS, images, and markers folders, as well as the files required or downloaded through Banhammer. We are going to go ahead and configure these as well, but we'll do those in later steps. The next step here is to actually go ahead and create a Google Maps API key. This is the first thing that kind of changes with this article. If we click on this link, we'll see that there is a new reminder here. We must enable billing. When we first set this up, you'll notice that we should be able to get this as a free service on our Google account. But what we're going to do is just go ahead and click on this Get Started button. We're going to select Maps because we don't really care about routes or places on our map. We'll hit Continue. We'll go ahead and log in as the correct account that we want to use for this. We're going to go ahead and create a new project here. I've already created a Fail2Ban map, so I'm going to just go ahead and select this. Or actually, you know what, we are going to have to go ahead and select create a new project from here, and then we'll click Next. And then we'll go ahead and select account for this particular project. It's going to give you this notification here. We'll hit Next. And it will display an API key here. This API key you're going to need to copy. So we'll go ahead and select this, and we'll copy it. And then as it says in the instructions, we want to add it to the index.html file. So we'll go in here, and we'll open up the index.html file. And we'll go ahead and replace this key right here with the one we got from our API. There's nothing else in here that you have to change. As you can see, I've changed this title here. But as you can see, this is just the structure for the HTML page that we'll be seeing later on our website. If you were to go to your list of banned IPs right now, you would see this map, and it would be blank, and none of these stats down here would be listed. As long as you don't get an error in the center of your screen, you've done it correctly. If you get an error, that means your API key is invalid, or you copied it incorrectly, or your payment was not set up successfully on your project. We aren't going to need anything else for this Google Cloud Platform project, so you can just go ahead and close out that tab. Alright, once we've done that, we can move on to the next step. What we're going to need to do is create a MySQL database and then fill out a file accordingly. Essentially what you'll need to do is create a database with obviously name of the database. It has to have one column and one row at the bare minimum. What we're going to be doing is actually loading a Fail2Ban SQL file into the database to generate the structure after it. So if you just create a bare bones database with row name test, column name test, and then set up user password for it. There are a lot of different ways you can create a MySQL database, whether it's my PHP admin or through Shell. I'm going to put this article here from WordPress on how to create a database. They have a lot of different service options like Flask, PHP admin, let's see here, SQL client through Shell, and then direct admin. Essentially, as long as you can fill out this information here, you're going to be perfectly fine. The next option is to just go ahead and use this login information up here that you created for this database to then just load this SQL file into this database here. Just make sure you point to the directory for this SQL file, whether you download it to the temp directory or some other directory. Once that's been loaded into it, it will then configure that database to have the correct structure for what we're going to need it to do later. The final step of the database creation is to just open up the dbinfo.php file within the www folder. You'll see that you have the host, which again you're going to match to your local host if this is a self-hosted server. You'll have the username, password, and then the database as well as the table within the database. And then we can go to the next step. The next step here is to go ahead and copy the fail2SQL folder into user/local. As you can see here, I have this located here. This will have just the rest of the files. As we can see, we have all the files copied in here. This is an extra file here that you will not see at the moment. We'll get to that in just a bit. What we're going to be modifying is the fail2SQL file, which is this one right here. And just as a note, you don't have to be using a FTP client. You can be using Shell to get to this. This is just an easier way to display it graphically. What we're going to be modifying in here is the MySQLi connect. As you can see here, I have my local host, my username, my password, and then the database it's accessing. The only other thing we have to modify, and this is where it's a little bit different than the guide, is this URL here will not be what you see in your file. This geolightcity.dat, this has recently changed. If we take a look, this is to a GitHub where Coinbase here has so graciously uploaded this DAT file. However, if we take a look at, let's see here, however, if we take a look at where this file came from, MaxMind, you'll see that this GeoLightCity file no longer comes in a DAT file, but comes in a tar.gz, which if we download and extract does not have a DAT file in it. So unfortunately, for this to work as configured on this site here, we are going to have to download this DAT file from that GitHub link. That'll be in the description. We don't have to modify any of this because essentially all we're doing is updating the URL it downloads from. It's still going to put it in the home directory as this file here. If you'd like to just direct download it, and then use an FTP client to toss it into this directory here, user local fail2sql. That'll work as well. You just need to have this file here in the end. That's something I missed the first time when I was recording this, is that we also want to make sure we chmod +x the fail2sql file. We also want to make sure that we're modifying the home parameter here. This user local fail2sql should be where we've installed it, but just in case you've gone kind of on your own path and placed in a different directory, you'll want to update it on that line as well. Alright, the last step here is the Fail2Ban configuration end of it. Essentially, the way this works is whenever Fail2Ban ends up banning an IP for whatever reason, we want to have an action fire off that, does what it was normally going to do, add it to the IP tables, or however you have it configured, as well as it wants to run this Fail2sql file here, which is the one we have here, with these parameters. There's going to be a name for it, the protocol it's using, the port, as well as the IP address. If we want, what we can do is actually use this and enter our own data here to test to make sure that this command is working correctly, that we've configured the previous 3 steps correctly. And that's what we're seeing here, this ban and this test protocol. I was running into issues, which I'll explain in a little bit, where this wasn't generating the correct list. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and type in this list here, or this here. This should work since we have the dat file correctly located after the previous step. We'll restart Fail2Ban, and then we'll check the output. What we can do, if I go here, oh, I was not in the right directory. Is we can see that we have a list of bunch of IP addresses and where they're banned from. So this is correctly configured. You should see an output if your Fail2Ban service has banned a service within the time that you restarted it and you ran the command. If you restart it and run the command right away, you probably won't see anything because it will not do the previously banned IPs, because essentially it's pulling from this action ban here. It has no idea of the previously banned IPs. What we can do is go ahead and check our map and see if that information is there. Now, if you're like me, updating this file in the iptables.config did not render this map usable because my Fail2Ban service was not using the iptables.config configuration file. If we go back to this DigitalOcean article, we can see that by default, the iptables.multiport file is going to be the one that's being used out of box. So if we take a look at that file, this file here, we'll see that on ActionBan you can see that I've inputted this line here. The formatting isn't that big of a deal. I put it on a new line with some spaces over here just to align it correctly. We're going to leave everything else the way it's currently configured. But essentially what this file is doing is when we hit an action ban, which is my server is currently configured so that after 5 failed login attempts or 5 failed authentication attempts, it will run the action ban command. It will add it to the IP tables and also then go ahead and add it to the Fail2Ban database. Now, the way Fail2Ban works and is utilized is that it will unban IPs after a set time in the configuration file and will never permanently ban an IP address. The way that the Fail2Ban map works, however, is that it will not remove it from the map. So this is kind of a amalgamation of all the IP addresses banned ever since you started the service. However, if you wanted to remove it from the database, I believe that could be easily configured with this action unban. You may have to modify how the Fail2SQL file works a little bit, but essentially we could just add it to the action unban here, and then it would find the name, protocol, port, and IP for the particular service we're looking to remove from the map. That may not be as interesting, but honestly, this is going to become a cluster of information after just a mere few days of port scrapes on your SSH protocol. So I guess to each their own. Once you have that file configured and set up, go ahead and save it. you won't have to restart your Fail2Ban service, but you will have to wait until a new IP address has been banned by Fail2Ban. Again, that only runs as they happen after the service is successfully set up. Once they're set up though and configured, you'll see your list populate here, and you'll see your pins drop on the map, and you'll be good to go. Alright, so there are a few shortcomings with using the old .dat file that could be either reconfigured or updated. That's not something I'm really that interested in, just because I thought it was more interesting to see a full list of the banned IPs. But if we take a look at, for example, this alleged attack from Alaska, and we go ahead and click on this pin and click on the More Info tab, what we'll see is this actually is loading in Singapore. Now I believe that that's the incorrect data is being pulled from our configuration side and not db.ip, because of course that database file, or not database, sorry, dat file we downloaded could easily be outdated. That's something that could be updated with the right knowledge set, but this was all sort of new to me at the time of this video creation. So at the current time, I'm kind of happy with where I'm at. It's not to say that I won't update it later. If anyone has any questions or is wondering why their configuration isn't working, feel free to reach out to me in the comments and I'll try my best. A lot of this is going to be dealing with how your Fail2Ban configuration is set up and which action D file you're using, because there are a lot of configuration files in here that you could be using or utilizing instead of, for example, IP tables or dash multiport. If anyone has any other videos they'd like me to go ahead and create, just let me know. And as always, thanks for watching.